This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on a number of bills that have been sent here. The first one we're going to take up is S96. I apologize, we're a little late, but we were late getting off the floor. The presenter of the bill had asked about a fiscal note, and so I discussed that with the Joint Fiscal Office and committee members. I think the copy was just provided to you. We can go through this about an act, but why don't we just have a quick presentation from the presenter, and then we'll decide what action and the concerns that have been raised and how we want to respond.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Senator Tanya Beaglesby from the Government Operations Committee. I was the sponsor of and would be the reporter of this bill. It does a few things. It is largely a bill trying to make sure we maintain the strength of our state employees union and that anything states is not made on the back of the workers. So section 1 changes the definition of a privatization contract. It would now include grants, and it no longer would require a position be eliminated, but if it instead looks at any classification that is doing substantially similar work. This is closing a loophole that allows the committee from state workers, private contractors to be sitting alongside state workers doing the exact same job, which is both a morale problem. And I know I've heard from constituents and many members of my committee have heard from constituents that it also creates a quality of service issue. Section 2 is largely existing law around the requirements for privatization contracts and the exceptions to privatization contracts. The one thing we did change is in the current language. I'm not looking at the bill, so I'm not going to get the statement exactly right, but it says that as long as the contract does not go against the spirit and intent of the bargaining agreement. And we had discussion that the language of the spirit of was somewhat vague and undefinable, and so we struck that, so now it just says the intent. The other thing you will see there is the listing of requirements for a contract to be certified and all of the exceptions. And one of the concerns I know we've heard of in committee was from the buildings and general contractors about the impact that this bill would have on them. Because of 2 exceptions, exception A and I believe exception H, it would have no impact on them because state employees do not currently build buildings or roads. And so one of the exceptions is that if the service the state employees don't provide, the contract will be accepted. And the other is if the state doesn't have the tools or specialized tools is really what I'm looking for, then again, the contract would be accepted. And because we don't build roads or buildings, they would be exempted from this. Section 3 changes the current savings threshold from 10% to 20%. We felt that that's a more substantial savings if we were going to privatize contracts. Section 4 requires a written report on or before January 15th about what impact this will have. As you see in your fiscal note, it was tough to name those impacts because there is currently no place where these non-privatization contracts that are kind of going through this loophole go so that they can be reviewed. And so on or before January 15th, 2025, we have that JFO and the administration working together to get that information. And then a delayed effective date so that the administration will have time to implement the plan with that additional information. So the effective date is July 1st, 2025 to align with the 2026 fiscal year and give plenty of time after that report for whatever those findings are in the report to be implemented into the budget and going forward. That is the bill.
Thank you. This is sort of a sequencing that we have had some discussion on other bills relative to either transition or whatever. The fiscal office did identify, actually we got this, but prior to that had some communication around some of the complexities and the nuances, which sometimes are very hard to make. And I was trying to recollect, something that happened in the past, and that was within the VR system. We did have it with Reach Up, and there was an issue around not, discontinuing the grants to our parent-child centers for case management, which is a very common class. And we ended up actually not, um, discontinuing the grants, but the number of grants are hundreds and hundreds, and some of them are federal. So there's been some comments that we have received around the complexity of what this means. Also, making sure the collateral impacts are understood. I've raised one of them certainly around our use of nonprofits and the calculations of benefits and salaries. So we do have this document here, which is saying the impact has been really hard at this point to quantify because you really need a lot more data collection in terms of what are those wage rates. We oftentimes hear complaints from our community-based organizations, certainly here for mental health, that they're not able to pay the wages that state employees get. Simply because the amount of the funding that the state provides does not allow them. It's not a choice that they want to do it. It's that their revenues are totally dependent on the state. So there are a whole host of issues or concerns that some members of the community have expressed, as well as we've had some comments from the administration. I would say one of the things that we would really want to understand better, and that is before we say that this is, that we fully understand what the bill as it's currently worded would do, is this reference to the study, and it's really the sequence of what we do first. And because in the description from BSEA, they're talking about only current but previous work. So one of the most obvious ones would be the state employees were at Woodside. And yet now the plan for a juvenile facility would have it contracted out. So how far does that reach back, so to speak, in terms of what was done? And then within, I know you looked at the Davis-Bacon issue, so that's not an issue. However, for those of us on transportation, and I know that Senator Perchik is one of the sponsors of the bill. I'd like to point that out, which I've done. A couple of times. That oftentimes there's been an effort to bring in small contractors and support from our businesses to do work that you could very clearly say is similar or exact the same that your highway district maintenance workers might do. So we are going to have to figure out how we want to proceed. We don't want to be insensitive to the issues here, but we also, I think, in light of trying to figure out how we move bills within the time frame we had, is thinking that our first step would be really to fully understand, make sure that what we're writing is what we want, we can accommodate, we understand the administrative demands that this would require. I did see, one of the sheets from Union, which is a little concerning, and that is the assertion around shoddy service, because actually state employees should be monitoring the quality of service and compliance with the grants, and raises a question about contract monitoring and oversight that is currently being conducted. So I want to hear from the committee in terms of your thoughts. We do have Joyce, who doesn't normally work on a Friday, right? Who has produced this in terms of outlining the areas of inquiry that and data that needs to be collected to actually conduct a fiscal note in its traditional way. So and we're just getting it because of the timing. So Senator Steve, do you want to comment?
Yeah, it's not clear to me how large the scope is. And so a couple of things that come to my mind. We spent a lot of time on justice oversight on the WellPAP contract with the Department correction. And uh, we asked the department to come back with what it would cost for state employees to provide the same service. And I don't have those figures with me, but it was astronomical. Now, you know, I take with a grain of salt that the department didn't really want to provide those services. So they may have been a little bit high in their estimates, but the fact remains that it would have increased the cost of incarceration, excuse me, even more. The other question I have is, for example, in Bennington, we have the Vermont Veterans Home, which is run by a private board, but all the employees are state employees. So would it be safe to assume that every nursing home that takes Medicaid persons in Bennington would need state employees since they're doing the same thing? Is that, I mean, I realize it may be something you hadn't thought of, but those are the things I'm wondering, where does it stop? And then Senator Kitchell asked about Woodside. Well, for 4 years I ran private nonprofit group home for delinquent kids contracting with state of Vermont, various departments. Started out with corrections and I went to the SRS. Remember, it was an SRS, and then it became something else, and then it became DC. But anyway, so would they have to do the same? Are they required? So those are the questions that I had as I saw that, saw the bill. I don't know if you can answer that, but certainly would be helpful before I vote if I know the scope of what we're looking at. I don't know if you have answers.
I'm certainly happy to speak to some of the concerns that have been raised. The first one I want to speak to is Senator Kill, your concern around the community mental health. Currently, our state employees don't provide community mental health services, and there will be no requirement that they start. I spoke last year, so this bill is carryover from last year.
But they do provide mental health, so that's a nuance for example.
So my understanding currently of the state employees' work, and again, I sat down with the executive director of Spectrum, which is a private nonprofit in my community last year around this bill, and we talked through it and came to the mutual understanding that it would not impact them at all, unless Spectrum was planning on trying to get a contract to do DCF's work, which I was assured they are not. They have no interest in taking that work on, and so it should not impact, again, the work that state employees are not currently doing. While they are providing inpatient care at the, I don't remember the name of the new state hospital. Thank you. They are providing that inpatient care. They are providing DCF services. That is not the same work that our community mental health organizations are doing. In terms of contract management and complaints about user experience, I would argue that it's much easier to manage a contract, to manage services that are provided in-house than it is by another entity. And one of the things we actually heard when we asked about what is being done to make sure that the quality controls are happening is that there's actually no user survey or user experience taken into account when that quality is measured. So I certainly know I've gotten multiple complaints about people reaching out and being passed to this person and that person and this person and that person before they finally get to a state employee who actually knows the way the systems work. And so if our quality management doesn't account for user experience, that's a problem. And it is much easier to supervise as the state, our state workers, than it is people who are contracted in by another entity and therefore required in control of their training and supervision. The scope is a little unclear, Senator Sears, which is why we pushed the effective date. Originally, the effective date is still on passage. And we heard that because these contracts don't currently, that we are hoping to bring into the process, don't currently go through this process, there is no place that they are held to be able to be tracked and looked at. And we really heard that concern, which is why we said we pushed that effective date out to 2025. So we got a sense of what would be needed to implement it. It was not our intention for that to be a study. It was our intention for that to provide us the information so that we can implement the policy and we give the administration time to use that information.
Well, in order to move forward, which I think we're saying needs to be done, and do it in a way that answers and does the data collection and analysis that's really necessary and to make the clear delineations, because we, as you look around state government, certainly, we have custodians that are in DGS, but we also have custodian contracts, and the question is even the calculus of how you determine comparable in terms of wage, and the other is obviously it's not just state employees, the salaries, but the overhead. I mean, people that need a place to work, et cetera. So one of the things that this committee does as a matter of routine, to be honest, would be to kind of reverse the project, say these are the areas of inquiry. They're very much the ones that you've laid out, and have that work done first. And then that would inform the parameters and maybe give some more clarity to some of the areas that we're, struggling with right now. And so, I don't know, I don't want to, my purpose is not to interrogate you in any way. I'm just trying to express the conversations that we've had in advance of all the bills, to be honest, that we've got today. I don't know if it's necessary to have Joyce Manchester do anything more than just her attempt to give us a fiscal note, which I asked for, and then she basically gave a response back in terms of the difficulties of actually carrying out that assignment. And so I appreciate the work that she put into it to say, I can't be permanent at this point. So, you all right there?
Yeah.
It is interesting that you bring up the custodians, because that is certainly one of the contracts that we have heard some concern about how that was privatized, not through the privatization contract law that we have on the books, but utilizing the loophole that allowed to create extra positions. So that particular contract is actually one of the ones that was done through this loophole that we are trying to close.
All right. So, yes.
I have a question for Joyce.
Yes.
On the last part of the fiscal note, you talk about questions on the ability to perform the study. And one question seems like a question to yourself about like what resources would JFO require to do? So you just didn't have the time, I guess, to answer that question, but just put it out there that it's a question we don't have an answer for today.
Yes, we do have an answer.
So we
We
do.
don't have the resources.
They don't have the resources.
Well, the question isn't, do you have, the question is what additional resources would be required? So you're saying you don't have them, but do you also know what resources would be required?
Well, I can, in anticipation of what we might do, because oftentimes whenever a bill has an appropriation or anything, we, I try to strip it out. This is maybe, what it does is recognize the limitations of our joint fiscal office. So it puts recognizing that, first of all these grants have to go and process through 3.5. And now if we're going to do grants, Agency of Human Services does hundreds and hundreds of grants, which would mean the Attorney General's review. So, and how does this fit within the existing systems and so forth? So and being sensitive to our instructions from the pro tem and the pleas that we're getting from joint fiscal, have put this analytical responsibility and data and the very questions that need to be answered to move forward, and with the clarity would have joint fiscal in a consultative role, but looking at the contracts and data and with some samples and so forth, that burden would be on the administration, to be honest. But the consultation, and we do have, fortunately, a new joint fiscal person came from human resources and worked, with classification and so forth, who could probably help in that role. But I heed the words and instructions of our pro tem, and that is workload pressures are of great concern. So what I have here is an attempt to move us a bit forward. And that is to really get an understanding of the fiscal and operational impacts, and then what it means to move the grants and treat them the same as contracts.
Yeah.
And,
Do we have one for?
oh, don't I have? I just handed it to you.
This on,
And understanding, for example, I don't even know how you would do a calculation, or even if it would be possible to meet the test, and I think that's one of the concerns, is if you have to pay the same salary and you have to provide the same benefits, how you can do it at 20% less than this state. I'm just worried that we might be putting some of our programs that we would really feel very valuable and are doing a good job at having as much as they could be. So it's with a degree of caution that I think.
That is the intent of the bill, is to ensure that any cost savings are because of new, more efficient technology and not by paying employees less and offering them lesser benefits. That is part of the intent of the bill.
Okay. All right. That's, and I didn't mean to.
Yep. I just wanted to clarify that that is part of the intent of the bill, is that cost savings should not come at the harm of employees.
Okay, of the service order, else provided.
What about at the benefit of cost of the room? Benefit to the employees.
I guess I'm not sure what your
Are
question
you
is.
talking about of the contracting agency?
No, say, we don't know in the bill, we don't know how much the grants are gonna add up to, right? But say if you do get grants and you do hire an outside contractor to do the work. And say give them $20 an hour. Well, you have a state employee do it with the vendors, and it costs you $30 an hour. So what about the loss that you're gonna get there between the $20 straight up for a self-employed contractor and say the $20 you're giving the state employee, but plus.
Well, I think you just identified it, kind of another question, and that is, if you've got a small business owner that might be doing something for agency of transportation, and they've been trying to support local small business, and they're not getting paid a wage, they're the owner, how would we treat that? I think is another kind of question in terms of comparability. But I'm looking at the clock, obviously this raises a host of questions that really warrant careful consideration and make sure that we understand the impact. And what I've done here in hopes that we could move forward in a positive way is to put the responsibility on the administration, but in consultation with joint fiscal, the state auditor, because they do a lot of review of contracts, the attorney general, because they're reviewing all these contracts, and that takes a while in terms of compliance. And then what will it take to set up that operational and review structure that the conditions, whatever they end up being, are met and understood. So this is an effort to start with that analysis and that examination of these areas, and then make a recommendation to how we should proceed, what needs to be clarified, what is the fiscal impact, making sure that when we're doing grants, because no one wants to adversely impact employees, but those of us who sit around this table know that a lot of the grants and our funding for a lot of services outside of state government are people are working because of personal commitment, not because of the financial gain. And obviously Spectrum is an example of that. So maybe I need to just move this along in terms of how you want to proceed. We have another, an alternative that is take these areas of inquiry, do the work, and then come back and make the decision on how to proceed.
How does this, I have both of them open, but how does this study, is it the same study, just kind of who's doing it, or is it you're also changing what they're studying?
We're changing the timing sequence. What this is doing is implementing before this done.
It didn't implement for the study.
Right, this is but the study's the same, that's the question.
It's changing the sequence, Rick. You want to answer?
Restating list council, Senator, it does add a couple of things that were going to take effect in the original bill, like the change of the definition of privatization contract. It adds that to the study to determine the effect of this definition change. And also,
To add grants, you said.
excuse me,
When, I didn't hear it.
so this study, it adds in, since we're not going to change the definition of what a privatization contract is, it studies that, what that definition change will be. How it will affect the ability to enter into these contracts.
Or grants.
Or grants, correct, yes. And that's the other thing it changes, is whether the effect of that, adding grant into the definition, how that will change the ability to implement these.
I understand up in the House, there's a bill and a lot of the nonprofits have been up there to testify about more timely processing of grants. I'm not familiar.
We went through the whole grants process a couple of sessions ago, and the grants for our DAs and SSAs are huge, and for the accountability piece is huge and maybe that's what they're doing.
So, any other comments you want to make, Rick?
The grant, it's also my bill 8140, so if you have questions about that bill, that's the House, I can answer those, but yes.
Oh, the one that the House is under, oh, that's your bill too?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I got Becky Wasserman's
Oh.
side of things.
So committee, yes, Senator Westman.
So it says administration in the players that have all these. Transportation is huge grants that are outside and they have probably as many contracts. On short-term contracts as anybody, should they not be included?
Well, I think the agency of administration would look throughout all of state government. AOT definitely beyond, outside of Davis-Bacon. There are fairly significant implications for the work that's done by AOT.
And I would think.
But I would say that the expectation, and I can't imagine the administration could do this study without actually examining all the departments and agency and state government. What are they doing with grants? What are they doing with contracts? What is the procedure?
I would think at least in this, that when you're sending the reports back to committees of the legislature, that the transportation committees are.
Well, if any committee that has grants would want to see it.
Yeah,
Well, I suppose we could do it to the entire General Assembly, because
That would be-
actually these grants are
probably
going to send
be
just about
better.
every committee, that, is there.
but I can't imagine that the transportation committees won't want to do this.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the communications I had, which I just got was from the agency, because they have a whole contracts office, obviously because of the work and, what they had said is that they felt that there would be increased costs for the contracts, decreased contracts to small and medium-sized business, higher bid costs, and extended timelines and so forth. So that's the kind of assessment that would need to be done across state government to make sure that the overall, we're not negatively impacting on the services people are not getting, or inadvertently precluding a segment of providers that we would not intend to have impacted. So we can change that to General Assembly, that's easy enough, and that covers everybody. Personally.
I support your effort to move the bill today with the amendment, making the study the main part. There's one part that is just like a policy issue that affects the amendment, the appropriations of the state. That's on page 2, striking of the word "the spirit." other contracts. I wondered if we would just keep that. It seemed like it was an issue with some, when they're looking at these, trying to decide what the spirit of contract is.
That's kind of a
I
nuance.
think that's their bill. They took out the spirit.
Well, I know, but if, I didn't know, I didn't understand if the amendment is to strike all that would strike this part.
Intent.
So what you would like to modify that existing language and delete the word spirit?
Yeah, it was in the bill, spirit and. would
Well,
both.
we have left council right back, we could do that.
I'm working it right now, Madam Chair.
Right, for those who treat that was an issue, trying to figure out what that meant.
Yeah,
Small thing, but
it is a small thing, and I certainly also appreciate your attempt to move forward, but I cannot. And I know I'm not on your committee, but I do want you to know ahead of time, I will not support this amendment on the floor. It is not in line with the intent of the bill, which is to provide immediate support to our Vermont State Employees Union and the users who are complaining to every member of, for the most part of my committee, has gotten multiple complaints about the services they're being provided. So in a moment when we're voting on a constitutional change to support our unions, it seems like we should be listening to one of our largest unions and supporting them as well.
Well, I appreciate your view, and, the intent, and obviously why you sponsored the bill. We're, trying to fully understand what that means, what is the impact, because ultimately we need to make sure we're balancing out a number of issues and being fair to the state employees. And I will say I was one for 35 years, and I will say that I worked hard to get our pensions and our healthcare benefits. So I hope that on my record of support for state employees is not, not well established in terms of the protection. I do know that we do get issues. We've had, I was involved in the discussion around the workers' compensation and how that was managed. That was a point. I know that there was a complaint about the VR comparability, and that was decided that in fact it was not inappropriate. So I know that there are differences of opinions, and contractors working side by side has certainly been a concern. And I think that's why contracting from where we started has changed. To say we don't need to make further changes, I don't want to in any way leave that impression. It's just when we're going to do something, try to make sure that we're informed and fully understand the collateral or the implications in a comprehensive way. So it's with that spirit, I guess I would say, that we're trying to move this forward. So what I heard, the amendment you'd like to have the statutory change to eliminate the word spirit, which would be very hard to evaluate anyway. Although I guess there might be times when people might think it was somehow malicious or in bad faith, but I want to put words in anybody's mouth. Okay. So other than,
Then Weston's amendment of, or you know that one too.
yes, we'll just take the general assembly.
Yes, Madam Chair, just emailed Hannah a version that keeps the spirit removal and changes the House of Ops, Senate of Ops, General Assembly, who gets the report, and she should have that copy.
That's, I can't
Seconds.
think, okay, I can't think of any any committee that wouldn't have some interest in simply because of the way grants go out. And the other part is we've got federal grants and conditions that go with the federal grants as well. And I'm not talking about the Davis Bacon, I'm talking about.
I know ag does millions of dollars of grants.
Yeah, but transportation is the only one with a division that's only related to contracts that I know of.
I think that's probably true, although I know we've looked at the number of grants.
Yeah.
Well, Agency of Human Services has pages of grants.
Whole grants, but no
No,
contract.
So thank you. I realize you're got a committee next door. I appreciate your coming in on such short notice. And I'm sorry, we're just getting so crunched.
I know.
Wish we weren't in this situation, but can't change it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
So, well, we're about to get, modified, as I understand it. The only changes we're making is that the report would be back to the General Assembly. And the other is to, make the statutory change to delete the word spirit. And then we would move forward with the study, as we've outlined, and the examination, along with the fiscal note, which I think does kind of identify a lot of areas that, need further exploration. So, does someone want to make a motion? And since this is, we're, we're doing a modification here.
An
So,
amendment.
yeah, so
Do you wanna move the amendment?
I'm gonna move the one that we've agreed upon.
It'd be 1.3.
Yeah, so
So, I want to make the,
version
draft
1.3, which will reflect those two changes.
And then.
I'll do that.
I'll second.
Are you 310?
I am, yeah,
Oh, good, take a seat,
okay.
take a number.
310's my number.
Oh, good, you're up. And 250, and, thank you. But we're taking a roll call.
You're voting, okay.
We're doing, on
Our
S
clerk sometimes will
96,
slow.
your other bill.
That was him not
You can be skipped. Senator Burrows.
Sassy.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yeah.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Westman, yes. Senator Kitchell. Would you want to vote?
Yeah, I did, but thank you for giving me the opportunity. Yes, I will, yeah.
There you go.
It's
no longer short of the bill.
No.
Who's that?
Does not look like Tanya's.
I don't know who
I think that might be
Yeah,
Thomas.
is it Tanya's?
She was in the-
It's Tanya's.
It is?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So,
310.
Hi, do you want me to get started or?
Our clerk is still clerking.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
We are. Now, 310. We do have a fiscal note on 310. And it's quite lengthy because the bill's quite lengthy.
Yeah, I
I
actually have not seen the fiscal note on.
thought we.
We had a summary, we had a section by section.
Yes, so. Do you have fiscal note? I don't think I've seen fiscal note. We have, I gave you a chart. I don't actually have anything with me except for the amendment, but, oh.
You
Who knew this existed?
get extra, you get highlighted.
You're the highlighted one. S310, just really quickly, is a large omnibus bill about government response to natural disasters. It includes a lot of provisions, most of which are policy provisions and don't have a fiscal impact, but then there are several aspects of the bill that do have appropriations. The bill does create a grant program for municipalities, which, as drafted, as sort of introduced, included a $15 million appropriation and also included a funding source, which was an extra assessment on insurance policies. We took that out of the bill in the Government Operations Committee, sent it to Finance, hoping they might make another proposal for a funding source. That didn't happen, so your amendment will just take the $15 million out. However, it would leave the fund and the grant program in there and make a connection to the S259 super fund, that in the future may be a funding source for the grant program. So it preserves the work we did on setting up the grant program and the fund, which is for mitigation of possible flooding in our municipalities. It is definitely something our municipalities need and want, but we understand that there's not necessarily a funding source for it. So that's the first thing. Thank you. And then the bill, as I said, has a lot of policy items in it. There is an additional appropriation, and it is funded through an existing assessment on insurance policies that increases the amount that's appropriated for training for EMS. This and that was approved by the Finance Committee. As you've known for several years, our EMS workers need more training, and there's not a funding source that's sufficient for it. So this bill has clearly natural disasters. You want trained EMS to show up in the case of a natural disaster. So we increased the assessment from 150 to 300,000. There are several small amounts, tiny little appropriations, tiny in the context of the amount of money you all deal with. One for a reevaluation of the tariffs on that the 911 board pays to telecommunication providers to get data from them. This is an update of a report that was done in 2011 that showed that the tariffs that our 911 board pays are much higher than the tariffs that other states pay. So redoing this report, the hope is that that would be reaffirmed and we could reduce those tariffs and save the 911 board some money.
And that would be the topic of your amendment.
Well, we're not necessarily, but we're still maybe doing some work on 911 next door, but then there's a $15,000 appropriation to the Department of Public Service for their Division of Radio Technology to update the connections from the Vermont State Police radio transmission towers to the primary and secondary state relayed radio stations. This was actually requested by the Broadcasters Association in order to have better connections for our state transmission towers in cases of emergency. And then the $25,000 for a multimedia outreach campaign. This was also suggested by the Broadcasters Association in order to get more people to sign up for the VT alert system, which I hope you're all signed up for. It's very helpful. So those are small appropriations. And then there is a $750,000 appropriation for the Swiftwater Rescue Team. The bill codifies the state Swiftwater Rescue Program. In the bill, it's called the Urban Search and Rescue Team, which is the federal term, or USAR. Codifying it will give the state the ability to better coordinate the regional and local USAR teams. Like there's one in Colchester, there's one down in Bennington, I believe. They're all over the state, but the state also has one and wants to be able to better coordinate it. They already do that, but the bill would give them a little bit more authority to do so. And it also would potentially allow the state to be qualify for federal funds for the USAR teams through FEMA. So that appropriation is in there. It also provides Vermont Emergency Management with 5.5 positions for the regional emergency management coordinators. Right now, there are 2 of those positions that are supposed to cover the entire state. And that is really inadequate. These are the positions that work with our local and regional emergency management planning organizations and committees. And as you know, that there's variation around the state about how well prepared and how sophisticated these teams are, but having these state level positions that are coordinating between state and municipal is really helpful. And then the bill also also provides an appropriation of, I think, a little over $1 million that would provide the same exact level of support for the communities that were flooded during August and December that the BAA provided to those communities that were flooded in July. So the JFO came up with the same calculation and what would be the equivalent for those communities that had the natural, you know, the declaration for August and December. So that is the last thing in the bill.
I would like to say that, the chair of the committee, in the spirit of cooperation and getting things moved along, knows what our usual practice is, so it's been very helpful. So when we have separated out and we know the top priority, which we will put on our one-time request list, is to provide the same level of assistance to those communities who just happened to experience a disaster for winter or whatever in July. And then the others will just have to be part of our 25 prioritization. So I want you to know that what I'm giving out is not going to be a surprise to Senator Hardy. But what it does is remove the money. It keeps the language, and I may have just given away my old copy.
Here.
Play
online.
And on the urban search and rescue, and because of the reasons that she outlined.
Sure.
And also, I think you had mentioned
Yeah.
the possibility of a grant or federal, some kinds of assistance. And then the tariffs, we did this in here as well, to get, which is a different issue. I keep complaining, I'm sorry.
Totally fine.
And then the other is deleting the requested appropriations as part of moving this forward. And then on first instance of amendment, and actually Michael Brady's here because we're going to be taking up 259, which is the super fund. And we just want to make sure that we are linking, because there was a fund created in this bill, but there's also anticipation and creation of a fund if with the possible settlement money that might come from that other litigation that other bill would initiate. So and on page 1, the first is the fund that's being created in this bill would consist of monies appropriated by adding or transferred, thinking, and Michael Brady's been helpful in trying to figure out how to connect the two and the language to put here relative to 259, which is our next bill. So
I think that
I'll
works.
speak to that.
I think you're gonna need an amendment to 259 to authorize transfers for these uses. But otherwise, I think the language that Tim has in that amendment works.
Okay, and do we have an amendment for 259 in anticipation of this?
No, but I can go draft one if you would like.
That would be good, because Senator Sears brought that up,
Yeah.
as making sure,
16 funds.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate that. So I think they definitely connect. This was supposed to, this fund or this program is supposed to be for preventing flooding and natural disasters in our municipalities. So it's a real natural use of that fund.
So, 310, as we have it now, and the amendment we're proposing, which we just talked about, removing the money, our desire to make sure that we are treating all those communities the same, regardless of whether it was July or early August or December,
Yeah.
potentially, and then taking the other appropriations and putting them on Senator Fursley.
Just to be, I think when you were explaining this, I was trying to see if I could get it online. So the USAR chapter, we're keeping everything in that, or chapter section, everything in the section there, you're just striking out the 750,000.
Yeah, and I think the appropriation was embedded in the same section in the bill, so that's why Tim just keeps the language in, but then takes the money out.
But hopefully we might be able to find some money at some point, but I understand.
Yes, I would love it if you guys could find some money for some of these things in the bill that are taken out, but I understand where you're at right now.
Other questions about, what we have here?
I'll move the amendment.
Second.
Try to get good.
Mhm.
Any other discussion on what we'll call the roll?
Bruce,
Yes.
Lines,
Yes.
Birchley,
Yes.
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Starr,
Yes.
Westman, yes, Senator Kitchell.
Yes. Thanks.
And the reporter.
Don't know who's sort of natural resources, but it's also, I don't, it could fall in a whole lot of buckets. Does anyone want to volunteer? Nobody?
Oh.
Okay,
You will?
okay, good.
All right. Our vice chair has agreed to,
Last year seemed like I got a whole bunch of these, but this year this is.
well, we don't want to leave you out.
I know,
If
but
you
volunteering.
you left out. Okay.
Clerical stuff, forgetting to call my name if they don't
What
volunteer.
I
happens,
absolutely didn't forget you.
No, but you might if I don't start.
No, I absolutely.
It was there, so.
Oh, did you take it?
I took it because I thought it was Tanya's, but it's not hers.
Oh,
So I don't know if some of the witness left it.
So it was here when we came in.
what happens if the super fund never?
well, then you won't have any money to
Then it
transfer.
doesn't get that much.
Yeah, we're not.
Then there, no money drops in for that.
So,
Comes from.
we're down at 2:59, but, Mike just want to do that amendment.
I've already
Give us money at
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, we did the,
We have Senator Weeks here.
we can do two or four
304.
on the back of your.
You want to do 304 and wait. So.
Spending money on clients. and
Why don't we,
before you-
while, Michael Brady's doing that
I hate to
change.
give up my place in the order, but I will for Senator.
All right, well, and let's, I'm gonna take you up on
Order to
that.
be
So
clean.
we're gonna move on to 304, which is, education bill and, CTE, so, I hate to tell you, but we're gonna take the appropriation and the petition and put it on our list, so,
I figured that was the case.
yeah.
I just wanted
Okay,
to
so
put something in here, so I don't really know.
if you just wanna just give us a brief summary of the bill, and I don't, do we have a copy of it?
I'll trust his,
Be careful.
Whatever we said,
So,
Sarah Lyons knows.
Yeah.
you'll fix him the next time around.
did you meet the new Secretary of Education?
I just briefly this morning when she was introduced.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Seems very nice, very, very well spoken, very.
So got the
Our connection to New England or just coming straight from Florida.
Florida.
Or,
a connection, family connection,
So there's a.
Mhm.
sisters.
Oh.
Okay.
That's great. So, we'll go back to the bill 304 and just wanna,
Sure,
this is technical, education, so.
that's right. So CTE, I know you're all familiar with CTE, much more familiar than I was a year and a half ago. So first, I think it's maybe appropriate just to give you the bill's origin. I think that's germane. So introduced by Senator Clarkson and Senator Campion in response to Act 127, which initiated a JFO study on CTE governance structures. The study was summarized by AOE in February 2 of this year. The actual study was conducted by an outside contractor, APA, so you may hear it referenced as an APA report. And they were trying to address two problems. One, as we all know, Vermont's labor shortage. And second, a CTE governance efficiency challenge. And I'm not really going to go into that because I don't really have the background to know what's been going on for the past 20 years with the
A problem we have not solved. And that
problem that
is
is.
financing and whether they're, the way in which we fund CTEs actually discourage sending schools from utilizing the resource, so it's been an ongoing
Yes, ma'am.
challenge?
You know, way more than I do.
Well,
No,
okay, well, we know that that's been a challenge, so, I think it's interesting, you're transferring, you know, which is something was just a big topic, and that's rulemaking,
Yeah.
giving it to the agency.
Right.
And
From the board.
my question there, if I might, is, I understand what's happening here with rulemaking around CTE. Is it the committee's intention that this be the first step toward transferring all rulemaking to ALE?
you're asking me, again, I don't have that background. I have asked the same question to Chair Campion, and short answer is yes.
Okay, because I know there has been discussion also about, from some senators, about a bill to eliminate state board. And it's, so it seems like we're at a foundational moment where we're considering.
I mentioned that today on the floor.
I was not going to name names.
Oh,
Not doing away with.
glad to know your
although I would
short-term memory is so
support that too.
good. Yeah. Okay. And then the reason we have it, so we'll move the rulemaking and then, aligning with post-secondary.
That's correct. Yeah, so secondary, post-secondary alignment, in 5 different categories. And then also, so I would say the focal point of the bill is the oversight of the CTEs and rulemaking. The kind of collateral issues, one is the alignment between the secondary, post-secondary, but also to get high school, middle school and high school kids at least aware of the CTEs that are in their region. And then in grades 9 and 10, to actually get them into the center so they can see it, so they can potentially envision themselves in such an environment if they're so inclined. And then just kind of a soft guarantee to be that CTE centers will be treated equitably with other state schools. And that's really the core of the bill. And the money bid is for 1 FTE in AOE to serve as the coordinator for CTE statewide. It's a little hard. There are CTE folks in the agency. They just want to have an elevated position more responsibility.
Other questions of the presenter of the bill?
Bills.
So what we would do is, as we always do, and that would be simply, remove section A, put it on our list, for, because this isn't ongoing, this is a base cost, obviously. The position is on the ongoing one, that's what's efficient. Certainly we know the staffing at the agency is, it's not a bad agency. So Senator Lyons, did you have a question, then Senator Starr?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have all the details of the bill, but, the linkage, the sort of the articulation agreements that you're looking for between higher ed and CTE. And it looks like CET is taking responsibility for doing that. Is that one of the roles that the new person would?
It would be to coordinate between the universities and the high schools.
So, yeah, so, was there any discussion of having some kind of collaborative process because and whether BSAC is involved or some other organization who work with higher ed folks, or whether higher ed itself, like DSC, to help build more of those agreements, because there are a lot right now, but trying to sort out. It's a lot of work for one person to reach out to all those different places, but if you have someone with some experience or an organization with that experience, it might work. My mind is blank right now. I'm trying to remember who was the former assistant to the speaker, who now has a little business.
Catherine Lavasser?
No,
Dylan
back
Johnson.
Yeah, look.
Back
a
row.
guy. Really good. Okay, so I'll have to sort my mind out on that one. But he has a little organization that does this kind of work.
Oh,
So,
gee.
Oh, the
website.
Tom Chan.
Yes.
Bless your heart.
But
So
I think this is, it sounds like you'd like.
It is different.
it is just different.
What I'm thinking is, with our high schools, I know Linden Institute has got a wonderful agreement with, in terms of, so that they can actually graduate from Linden Institute, which operates a CTE with 2 years of college.
Right.
When they graduate from high school. And I think what they're trying to do is make that same connection to higher ed that exists in the, uh, high school arena, which already exists, that articulation. And in some, it's with CCV, but others, actually, it's with Southern New Hampshire University. I'm telling you, they've come in and created those agreements with our high schools. They're very aggressive. People say, why aren't our own, Vermont institutions really doing that? But that's a different topic. But I think and I
Well,
know
it's here.
but the way I'm interpreting it, you want the same kind of arrangement for the CTEs that currently has been developed with institutions of higher ed, for other students that are not in CTEs.
Where would this position live? So it's in the CTE program.
Anyway,
Agency now. And they do have, because a couple of years, and I hate to think about it, it's been quite a while, they have a limited staff capacity in this area. So it's not in any way dismissing the need, it's just put it on. So, thank you for coming in. I would entertain a motion to move the bill favorably with, as amended, and that would be the amendment would be, and Beth is trying to have it done already.
No, Senator Bruce seconded.
And that is to remove current section 8, moves section 9 up to section and renumber it. So,
Yes.
you didn't even want any more discussion.
Yes.
Birchliff,
Yes.
Sears,
Yeah.
Star,
If we ask, just put our kids in
Walter, Jess,
Yeah.
Patchell.
Yeah. Education, that's, that improves. Thank you very much.
thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, now we're still waiting on Michael Brady and we have more. And Beth will, yeah,
I already found it.
okay.
Are you looking for Mike?
Yes, he was working
was
on an
here.
amendment
Okay.
and so he just ran off to do that. And we're just awaiting his return.
Okay.
And we didn't get a bill today.
No, finance is voting out a bill today that's on the ag and eligibility for VETA and also,
I think it's dead.
Yeah, too late.
now,
It's about agriculture.
And
It's too late. It's unfortunate. Have to wait.
priorities.
We'll
I
be
would
back
like
here
to
at
let
11
you know
p.m.
that your chair was sympathetic and I'm going to move that we have not had the bill referred to us, so we can.
It's fine with me. If you don't want to pass it, you'll just find it loaded on another bill.
I know you.
When would you do that?
So,
Would you tell us when you do it?
so I'm gonna just go off live and we'll come back, alive once we hear from Michael Brady and,